this is a public board meeting, and all our public board meetings are recorded and live streamed on the school district's YouTube channel. And I'll call the meeting to order. Board of Education acknowledges that we are on the traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on their land and the gift of working with their children. First order of business is adoption of the agenda. The Board of Education adopt the April 28th, 2020 regular public board meeting agenda as presented. Do I have a mover?
Trustee
Kate
Frawley.
move.
So I've got trustee, I'm not sure.
Frawley.
Trustee Kate moved, and who seconded?
Trustee Caton, I believe.
Okay, who moved?
And Frawley second.
Okay. We'll straighten that one out for sure. Any discussion of the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor or anybody opposed? I'll do it that way at this time. Hearing no opposition, I move on. It's adopted, and I move on to the meeting minutes of March 31st, 2020. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education adopt the March 31st, 2020 regular board meeting minutes as presented. They're on page 3 of the agenda package. Do I have a mover for that?
Trustee Hawksby.
Thank you very much. A seconder?
Trustee Frawley.
Thank you very much. Any opposed? No, then any questions, any issues, any concerns about the minutes? Any corrections? Hearing none. Move on to the next order of business, which is old business, and there is none. And the next is the report on in-camera meeting, Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. We had a in-camera meeting, and subjects of discussion were personnel and other. Any question, any issue, any concern? Hearing none, I'll move on to the board chair's report. Now, it's a little different than usual, just simply because our whole world is a little different than usual. But I definitely would like to begin by thanking senior staff. I think in particular, back to Alan's description, Alan Douglas is our director of primary and intermediate students there, and his description of the safety protocols that were put in place for students and staff now in the schools, and how just incredibly detailed, and it gave a very, very clear picture to me of the amount of work that has to be done in order to have the students and staff safely in the buildings. And I was very impressed with it. I also wanted to commend our teachers, our maintenance staff, our support staff, our parents, and most importantly, our students at this time and with what they are all dealing with. Now, other points of business. No doubt you've all read the attachment that Heidi sent recently to us, in which the chair of the Comox Valley Regional District formally invited all council and board and senior staff representatives to participate in an election officials forum on Tuesday, May 5th at 4 p.m. This will be a virtual meeting, and I believe an invitation will be coming out in that form to us shortly. No decisions will be made during this session. The goal of it is to bring all Comox Valley elected officials together to collectively receive presentations and informations respecting a topic of mutual interest and shared perspectives. The meeting is expected to conclude at about 5:30, so it's about an hour and a half that they're thinking. There is another meeting as well coming up on May 25th that trustees will be invited to. Director Edwin Grieve and the Early Years Collaborative are hosting a discussion on building connections for Valley families. Comox Valley Early Years Collaborative and Director Grieve, the director of the Early Years collaborative and direct agreed will be particularly concerned that are particularly concerned that they don't see too much in the way of preschool and childcare north of the city. So this will be I believe, the focus of their discussion at that time. Time and virtual invite to follow. And lastly of that series, there is likely in short order an invasive species forum for trustees to attend if they're interested on with the mosquito season approaching. On the heels of the COVID health crisis, there is no doubt an information forum on this topic that all trustees will be invited to attend, date and virtual invite to follow as well. Now today, I had the opportunity as well to listen, as probably many of you did, to the Minister of Education, Rob Fleming, and our president of the BCSTA, Stephanie Higginson, and they gave a media conference today. And from that, there was several things for the general public to take away, I think, as important notices. One, that this was a media conference, was not an announcement about opening schools at all. Face-to-face instruction remains closed for most students. They did acknowledge, or he did acknowledge, that providing educational support for our vulnerable students with special needs, and those whose parents provide an essential service in the tier 2 categories are the priority at present going forward. A lot of discussion, contacting and research is being done by the government with areas similar to ours. He did mention New Zealand, but there are others that I know that they're looking at to see how BC could safely dial up a resumption of school. It would be done in a very thoughtful manner. They want to continue to the preventative measures that now exist and carry them forward into the rollout as one occurs down the road when appropriate. The priority first and foremost is student, parent, and employee safety. If and when, this is directly a statement from the minister, if and when we announce an opening, it will be after having really tight safety protocols and the development of a detailed plan. Another statement from him, we know full well we may not be able to implement those plans this side of summer holidays. And finally, it is really about contemplating what the next steps will be. All will be, and this was from our president, a measured approach based on, and those were the things that sort of occupied me over the last couple of days as chair, and there's always a change in this particular situation. That is my board chair report. And I move on now. There is no presentations or delegations at this time, unfortunately. Education Committee, as the Vice Chair will know, has not met in April. And so we go to strategic planning or strategic direction, the superintendent, and I will turn that over to you now, Tom.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'll echo a lot that Trustee Hargrave said. A lot of the meetings with today with the minister and of course Stephanie Higginson regarding a lot of the good things that are happening. I would encourage trustees, and I know our director of communication, or sorry, manager of communication, Mary, has sent out a lot of information to you about good news stories. There are a lot of great things happening in our buildings, outside our buildings, with our families, taking many, many shapes and forms. So I would encourage each of you to take a few minutes to look at it. There's a news broadcast today regarding a birthday parade that was organized and involved one of our schools. Really, yes. It's really nice to see our community coming together for this. So I want to share a couple of things with you since we had a last conversation. I had quite a lengthy conversation as the senior team joined in with Dr. Charmaine Enns, and Dr. Enns was all the medical health officers for the province were asked to speak to their respective school districts around 5 questions. And they were, what concerns do you have with school resumption? When do you think it's a reasonable time to return? Perception of students on returning? What kind of things would we need or would we like to see? And anything else that we think is important or needs to be addressed before students returning. That conversation took us about an hour to go through. Again, paramount for the message we echoed is first and foremost is safety. Safety of our students, safety of our staff, making sure that proper protocols are followed, have been established. Along with the safety from our perspective, we expressed concern about ensuring we had all the proper PPE, cleaning supplies, all those things moving forward. So those were a couple of things we started to talk on. We brought up points of, with some form of welcoming students back, there was concern around the social distancing as it applied to busing. In terms of transportation, how do we bring students here? What happens if you're taking half the students, as has been mentioned in the media a few times, you know, doing a staggered approach or a gradual approach, half the population? What happens on that day off for those students? Again, what are the age that they're looking at? Amongst all this, I think one of the things that we really shared with her is the need to understand where are we going to be in September, because we're finishing off a year and many of our staff did an excellent job preparing students to get into this point and finishing off. Starting a year is a different ball game. What does it look like? So we expressed the need for staff to have time at the end of this year to prepare for the start of what could be different, because all indication for us is that September will look different than it ever has. And it's really important that we have the opportunity to address that. The other perception or a perception of students and staff returning is actually coming back to the building. There's a lot of anxiety and it's coming back in slowly. And how do we work allowing our employees to come back in, and what does it look like to work in a social distancing environment in the school? How do our custodial staff manage that? The need that we brought forward around custodial staff is having daytime custodians in our elementary schools, which we currently don't have. So there's need for personnel shifts and personnel, possibly additional personnel to address those concerns. So that was also brought forward. The last thing that we did talk about, which we really hope is taken to heart, is consistent messaging, because at times there appears to be different messaging from the our provincial partners in government and our federal. And I think sometimes it puts people in an awkward spot. Well, who do we listen to? What is the information on there? How is this transmitted? How is it transmitted from children to adults and vice versa? So lots of misinformation. So we wanted to make sure that we had accurate information for everybody. So it was a very good conversation, and Dr. Enns did share that our concerns and our feedback was very similar to other districts. There was nothing outlying that a lot of districts said have shared the same information. All that information is being gathered around the province and then collated for the provincial health office, and at that point that will be used in their decision making moving forward. I also would like to share with you, we had a question from the ministry around a couple areas I'll share with you: essential service workers and childcare that we're providing. And so the question was asked, how many spaces currently? So presently we have approximately 60 spaces in 4 sites. All sites are open, and we're getting pretty close to reaching capacity and having to look at the next level. We're just finishing our first 2-week run. After this 2 weeks are up, then we start a new team that comes in. The really nice part about this is we've had a number of people that have worked in this first 2 weeks that have actually asked if they can stay on for the next 2 weeks, because just, you know, they really appreciate working with students again. It's nice to see kids back in the buildings, and they're really having a good time, and they'd like to continue. So that was a real positive step for us. So that's continuing along. I'll get to the other part, the vulnerable students, in a minute. The other question we were asked is how many devices have we loaned and are available for loan? So currently we've loaned out approximately 225 laptops. We have an inventory of about 50 remaining, and schools have also loaned out approximately 75 to 100 iPads. Those are all available and out in the system currently. And as mentioned, we do have a bit of an inventory moving forward. If families are requesting technology working through their schools. We've heard from a couple areas now about Wi-Fi potentially being an issue. So we're going to do some digging. I know that provincially there was some talk about some support there to try and help some areas that are struggling. We'll have to work around that to try and identify those areas and really see if we can get some support, so consequently our students can have that necessary to complete their courses. And thank you for folks to bringing that information forward to us. The next question was asked is how many students or families are we providing meals? Currently working with Lush Valley, we have approximately 250 families accessing the program. And that's one hamper per week, and a hamper is approximately enough food for a week. So that's how that's been going. And we have to really thank Lush Valley for working with the school district on that and providing a very, very valuable service. On top of that, as I mentioned before, all of our schools have donated and have food cards available to support individuals and families. And I should mention that some of our rural schools, our island schools are working with their community organizations to provide meals. So Hornby, Denman, and Miracle Beach are working with their little individual community organizations. So really, one thing that's becoming clear, it is definitely a community effort. That is, everybody's pitching in, everybody's seeing this and working towards it. So I need to thank everybody involved in that. Vulnerable students. We have all the schools now are working with their school-based team, identifying vulnerable students and students that we need to get in contact with. And in some cases, it might be starting to plan what will it look like bringing them back into our schools. In doing that, Paul Berry and Russell Roy will be working with those schools to develop the protocol around the safety, health and safety measures that will take place as people return back into our building. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes from the operations side and a lot of work at the school side as they're identifying those students and finding out what exactly is the need of those individuals. In some cases, with some of our vulnerable learners, we actually have staff going out and doing some respite care with those students during the day, depending on their individual needs. And I'm not sure, Director Schatz, did you want to comment anything about some of those programs?
No, I think you got all the information.
Okay. So I can leave it there. There's lots going on, a lot of planning happening moving forward. As I said, we've asked the other area that with our secondary schools that we're talking a lot about and hope to have at least some roughed out plans is around a real important milestone, which is graduation for our youngsters. And it looks like the opportunity to bring people together is not going to be what we normally have done. But I can tell you this, that every one of the schools and people in the buildings are working hard, planning some events. It's something that we're going to try and get our community behind. So we're working with all the municipalities, and I'll be in a conversation with them later this week to share some ideas around what we can do and really try and make this special given the current circumstances and situation we're in. So they're working on it. I'm just so very happy with the amount of the ideas and the things that our schools are coming up with, the programs our teachers are offering, the good news items, the videos, and engaging kids in different ways of learning has been wonderful. So I just want to thank everybody for doing all those wonderful things. That's it at this point in time. We continue to plug away at this and learn and make the best of it.
So Chair Hargraves, I have a question to the superintendent. What process are you
Please.
going to have for asking questions?
Well, since I can't see the layout of the land outside of the 4 pictures that are in front of me, just again, if people can acknowledge and pass them to the chair, we can do it that way. So
Okay.
Janice or Trustee Caton, you're on.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions and then a concern. And I know that when we go back to school, we based on science and what Dr. Bonnie Henry says. And she's talking about possibly going back May or June, which I think that for a lot of community and parents is maybe too soon. And we need to really maybe think about coming back in September to the new reality. Has there been discussions about maybe saying, hold it, maybe wait till September? And we talk about vulnerable students being looked after, but for opening schools and processes, there's been some talk and conversation about maybe saying, let's wait with the new reality and look for September and look what our programs are going to look like. Several factors. One is you're going to have parents who are not going to allow their kids to go back to school no matter what we say, unless there's a vaccine, and there's the proof on that one there. You're going to have some teachers and staff that will be concerned. There's a lot of unknowns and fear and concerns out there. So this talk in the media about possibly come middle of May opening up schools to some whatever it is, I think is premature in some respects, because I think as school districts and communities, we have to have a broader conversation over what that new reality is going to look like, how we're going to protect our staff, and you allude to it yourself when you're in your conversation, what's going to look like. So has there been some talk and discussion saying, hang on, let's wait till September, plan over the summer, and maybe look at the new reality to address some of those outlying concerns? Because what do you do with those parents who don't want their kids in school? How are we going to support them when their others are in school? So that there's a lot going on, and I don't see us going back as soon as what the media and that little tidbits we're getting out there. That would be my concern.
Okay, and thank you, Trustee Caton. Those concerns have been shared by not only our district, but others on the island. We connected as superintendents around the Mid and North Island, and all of us in speaking to our respective health officers did share that. As I've said earlier, our staff and student safety, health and safety is first and foremost. To bring students back in now, I'm not a medical expert, so it's really hard for me to make the appropriate comment saying we're good to go or we're not. Well, obviously, we'll take our direction from the provincial bodies, but I did express the concern about having something new, a new September that we're facing that doesn't look like anything we've done, and not having adequate time to prepare for that now, and prepare not only what it will look like in terms of the teaching and learning, but preparing our staff and our students for entering a building with health protocols. Currently, the provincial government is working on developing those protocols for reentry and what it will look like for schools. And that's what we've asked for. We need some direction and consistency in messaging. And you're correct, the media and different individuals who have been speaking to the media have been sharing their own view of what, where, when, why, and how in terms of a reentry. And we're trying not to get into that. We're simply saying we await our direction. Here's our desire, is to wrap up this current year in the best possible way we can, as well as allow people the opportunity to get ready for what we think September is going to look like.
Ian?
Yes, Trustee Waite?
Oh, this Trustee
Not sure who's speaking.
McDonald. Are we
Okay.
crossing?
Yes, Trustee McDonald.
Okay, yeah, just want to make sure so I thought the last comments I heard from Dr. Henry, I was a little bit happier. I'd had some concerns before about that, but I did hear her really focusing on those very limited number of special needs students, and I think she referenced that. And I thought I hope all of you had a chance to see that press conference with the minister. It was quite interesting how well he avoided answering a lot of very speculative questions. And I couldn't believe, like, are we going to go to mandatory vaccinations? Like, this is so speculative. It's just, you know, how can we possibly know when or what we might be doing then? But I thought that they did an excellent job. And again, what I'm picking up and hearing, so much the media is talking about a return, and parents are reacting to the and staff too, that this could be wholesale return in numbers. But I really appreciate the work you're doing to identify those students who have special needs, who may not be verbal, who may have other reasons why, having them on a limited basis in the classroom, and then the work that has been done for childcare support, which of course those students have teachers who would be doing the teaching work with them, but they are in a safe place and the school's been made safe. So I somehow to be able to get the message out that any kind of return to school is likely to be on a very prioritized and individual basis, that's feel comfortable. And listening to them talk about, well, Denmark and New Zealand are doing it. Well, those guys have more stringent controls than we do, and what they're discussing are extremely limited circumstances, and it is not, parts of this discourse not very happy. So I feel really confident in the approach that all of you are taking and the work that you're doing to make sure our students are getting what they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Not hearing any further questions. Thank you very much, Tom. That was excellent. And I do hope at some time that we can have, I would love to have Alan again go through that whole description of what it's like for the safety protocols. That, as I say, really made it clear to me how seriously involved having a child come into the school is for each and every one of them, and for all of the staff, and all of the safety protocols around that. It's phenomenal. And I don't think people who have been in a school have a clear picture in their mind of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think what you'll see is you're going to see a video that was made this morning by Mary, and starring the one and only Mr. Douglas. And what they did is went to Brooklyn and they walked through everything you heard Alan describe about the safety protocol, described by the people that are working in it, along with the activities and showing folks the room. So that will be coming up shortly. I'm hoping in the next day or so, once Mary gets a chance to edit it and do her magic with it. So I think it'll be very informative. We'll make sure trustees get it. It'll also be on our website as well.
Just let Mary know that Alan has only one good side.
He's evil on the other.
He's never met a camera he doesn't like.
Hey, I just want to say it was one take. That's it, no script.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Okay, moving on. There's nothing from our assistant superintendent, so I will now move to the next order of business, which will be the briefing note, the capital plan bylaw number 2020-21, and ask our secretary treasurer if she would like to speak to the briefing note.
Thank you, Chair Hargraves. So there's a briefing note included in the board package. This information was provided to trustees at the last board meeting as an information item. Back in May 2019, the board approved our 2020-21 annual 5-year capital plan, in which we put together a proposal for a number of projects and submitted it to the ministry. And just recently in March, the Ministry of Education approved 2 capital projects for our upcoming school year. Those are the boiler replacement at Mark R. Isfeld Secondary and a fire suppression system at Cumberland Community School. So in order for us to access the funding for these projects, we need to have a capital bylaw passed by the Board of Education in accordance with the Ministry of Education requirements. So the recommendation in the briefing note is that the capital bylaw is given 3 readings tonight at this meeting and that it's passed and adopted. Also included with the briefing note is a copy of the capital plan bylaw and the ministry response letter regarding the 2 projects that were approved. And the recommended motion is included in your agenda. So I would love it if we could give 3 readings to the capital bylaw tonight.
Thank you very much. Can I have someone read the first recommendation? Please move it and second it,
Okay, I'll do the first one.
please. Thank you, Trustee Kate.
That school district number 71 Comox capital bylaw number 2021 CPSD 7101 receive its first reading.
Seconder?
I'll
I'll
second.
Thank you. Sorry, Trustee Howe, thank you. All those, anyone opposed? Hearing none, can I have someone read the second recommendation? And
I can read that. It's Sheila. That's
please,
school district number 71 Comox Valley capital bylaw number 2020/21 CPSD 7101 receive its second reading.
I'll second that.
thank you very much. Anybody opposed? Hearing none. We need a third reading,
Tanya,
please.
that the board unanimously agreed to suspend the requirements of the School Act to have the third reading of capital bylaw number 2020/2021 CPSD 71-01 at a subsequent meeting.
Can I have a seconder?
I can second that.
Thank you very much, Trustee Howe. Anyone opposed? Excellent. And the last reading, please.
I'll do that.
Please.
The school district number 71 Comox Valley capital bylaw number 2020-21 CPSD 7101 receive its third and final reading.
Thank you, Trustee Huxby, and
I'll second that.
thank you very much, Trustee Caton. And anyone opposed? And so the capital bylaw is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
On to our budget information package.
Okay, the whole section is mine tonight, so you're going to get tired of hearing my voice. So what I've included in the board package tonight is it's the preliminary budget report. It's an information package that has worked its way through the budget committee virtually, of course. We are all corresponding via email, but I have shared this document with the budget committee, and now it has come forward to the board as an information item as we continue through our preliminary budget process. It's not a long report. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I will just, for the benefit of our newer trustees, just do a quick walkthrough of the budget process and where we're at. So where we kind of left off the last time we talked about the budget process was we were waiting. We had submitted our preliminary enrollment projections for September, and we received our preliminary operating grant announcement on March 13th. As a result of that preliminary operating grant announcement, there was some information provided around the results of the funding model review. And there were 3 items basically that affected our district regarding some changes to the funding model review and our funding allocation system. Essentially, it was that there were some special purpose, not special purpose funds, but some specific grants that were rolled into the operating fund. So my budget information package talks a little bit about student enrollment and how that affects our operating grant. I talk about how our revenue has changed, what the effect of that operating grant announcement is on our district due to our projected enrollment, and some changes with other revenue items that the district is seeing projected for next year. I also walk through some of the cost pressures that the district is facing in the upcoming year. I detail that and I quantify it, which leaves us, and I thought that this was really interesting, and I've had a lot of discussions with our senior staff and some of the budget committee members. When I did my first run through of our preliminary budget position, we actually had a small deficit. We were actually in a shortfall position, which caught me by surprise, because given the fact that our enrollment is projected to be up, typically we have a little bit of extra money to spend after we've covered all of the costs of our programs and services. But when I look provincially, and I'm reading the BCSTA weekly news, and I'm talking to other secretary treasurers, and I'm sure you're all noticing it as well, most districts are actually running into a shortfall when they're looking at their preliminary budget this year. And I find that really interesting. It does make me wonder a little bit about truly what the effects of the funding model review have had on districts. But we have yet as secretary treasurers to do that work yet to determine what effect the funding model review may actually have had. As I worked through, this is a second draft of the information package. We were able as a finance department to do some tweaking to some of the items, some of the cost pressures, reevaluate some revenue items. And we have actually at this point been able to get us to a balanced budget position, which again is interesting, because what that means is we don't have any extra money really to go out and say, how do we need to spend this money? So it's not bad news, but it's not good news. We're in a great position right now. We essentially have enough money now to cover the costs of proceeding next year with our programs and services. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And in a few minutes, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll talk a little bit about what next steps are. So this package is being presented to the board this evening as an information item. The work continues. We have included our partner groups, even though our committee meetings were suspended. We have reached out to our partner groups and asked them to provide some feedback on the budget process and some input around things that they would like to see in the budget. We know that we're not going to be able to honor many of those requests, given we don't have the additional funds that we've had in the last couple of years, but I have encouraged them to submit their thoughts and their wants and their needs anyways. I think it's important that as a district, we hear our partners. So I'm collecting that information. I have submissions from all of our partner groups, and we actually have a public budget survey on our website. It's been up for about a week and a half now, and it closes on Friday. So I will be collecting and collating all of that information. We've had tons of responses from the public as to what they think our priorities should be in setting a budget. I'll collate all of that. I will bring it back to the budget committee for information and for them to review the proposed preliminary budget as it is being presented this evening. And then, of course, we have the committee of the whole meeting where we will present it to you for discussion. And then, of course, our budget bylaw needs to be approved by the end of June, but we'll bring it to you in May for approval. So that's sort of the process and where we're at. I know I just want to touch on one more thing while I'm here, and that is, I know that there are concerns about what next year is going to look like with this COVID pandemic in place right now. It's really a guessing game right now at this point, not knowing what things are going to look like next year. Are we going to have a second wave of the virus? Are we actually going to be back in our schools? We have accounted for many of the items that we're being asked to consider by the ministry in our current preliminary budget. We have looked at our international revenue. We've taken that into account and what impact that might have. We're going to continue to do work on that. and assess whether there will be significant impact from our international program next year. We've looked at our lease revenue, our interest revenue. We're assessing everything for next year. As far as additional costs, my thoughts right now are that, as you'll see in the next agenda item where Candace goes over our projection for the current year, we are projecting to have a surplus at the end of this year. And my recommendation to the board will be that if costs start to build up and start to hit us next year in relation to the pandemic, in the September board meeting, I will be bringing a surplus spending plan forward again, as I did this year. And I'll be likely requesting that we hold a contingency to address those additional costs that may take place next year. They are going to be one-time expenditures. They're not going to be things that hopefully we need to sustain for years and years. So I think that surplus funds will be a good use of money to address those things that may pop up over the next year. So we are thinking about what next year looks like and what impact that will have on our budget, and more information to come over the next few meetings. And now, if there's any questions on that information package.
Any questions?
So I have a question, Ian.
Please.
I do. So I'm looking on page 33 and number 11, when you talked about the projected accumulated operating surplus is approximately 3,832,000, which is approximately 4% of the operating budget, which is flexible. But I'm wondering, with respect to operating budgets and with surpluses, is it, and I'm wondering, looking at the possible cost implications regarding the new norm of school, whether it's extra busing and janitorial cleaning and that one there, is it possible to consider setting aside another percentage of the reserve to deal with strictly with the COVID-19 implications on school costs? So for example, when the ministry looks at our budgets and looks at reserves, it's actually been targeted for specifically dealing with COVID-19 expenses rather than just leaving it as general in the reserves, that we've set aside X amount of dollars to be the I guess I'll call it that emergency rainy day fund to deal with the unexpected costs that may occur, whether it's daytime janitors, whether it's the cleaning fluids or like cleaning solutions, whether it's the hand sanitizers in schools, all the extra cost, and just target it for that. So when the government looks at our budget, our surplus is not high, it's actually targeted. It's something to consider. I'm not sure about the process, but I am really concerned over cost. I'm also concerned next year if our numbers are down because kids are not coming in schools and we don't have those students, those full-time students, when the government looks at our numbers, the following year we're going to get hit with, because it's based on year projections. That's the other concern that I have, is those parents who will take their kids out of the system, put them into homeschooling because they don't want the kids in school at all, and the impact that could have on us. So I'm kind of nervous, and I'm kind of really nervous over the next 2 years what this is going to have on our district and funding. And I've been a trustee now for 14 years, and I have done so many budgets where we've had to cut, and it's hurt students, and we can't afford that right now. Not with the mental anxiety that kids are going through, all the other things are going through there. I'm concerned, Nicole. I have to tell you, I'm really concerned that we're not going to have the money to do what we have to do.
Yeah, so thank you, Janice. The first point that you raised is exactly what I was talking about. Once we know what our year-end surplus is, my recommendation to the board will be that we put some money aside and target it specifically related to any pandemic-related costs that we see in the upcoming year. So absolutely, your plan is exactly, your thoughts are exactly what my thoughts are right now. As for ongoing for the next few years, again, you're absolutely right. We'll have to see what our enrollment looks like in September. I don't anticipate it will be down. It may remain status quo, like what we're at right now in the preliminary budget. But yeah, we're balanced right now. And the option, if we want to start adding things, is that something's going to have to be cut. So we don't want to get into that scenario again where we're having to make cuts during this difficult time already. We are lucky we have a substantial surplus And I think that our surplus is a good use of the money to fund these costs for the next year. And if we see this continuing on, when we look at our preliminary budget next year, that might be a time where we have to think about, this might not be going away. Now we need to build it into a more sustainable budget. So yeah, we'll absolutely keep working on this as we work through it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question, Ian.
Yes, please, Sheila.
Yes, thank you. Relating to the changes to funding formula and this equity of opportunity supplement, is that a new supplement or is that a renaming of Community Links dollars, or would we still be receiving Community Links? And I'm just wondering the background of how are they determining our portion? Is it per capita, or is it actually based on some sort of poverty demographics or the EDI ratings of districts so that it reflects their real needs?
Yeah, it is they're calling it a new grant. It is, I think 60% of the funds for the new grant is being taken from our vulnerable student supplement. Another portion of it is being taken from our BC education plan. And then the rest, they would say, is new money. So the majority of it is being taken from other grants in our operating fund. And how it was apportioned, I believe, was based on our FTE. I don't think that there was a lot of work done to take a look at our need. I think it was they looked at our vulnerable student grant, took 60% of that, and yeah. Does that help answer your question? It is not new money.
So affluent districts with lower EDI ratings will benefit, and some of our most vulnerable districts and students will, I don't know. Am I surprised?
More
Really.
Yeah, more vulnerable districts will receive a bigger grant. Yes.
Okay, that would be nice. Just on that topic too, the employer health grant, by rolling it in, will you be still tracking what we would have had to pay on our employer health and then bill back to the government just for information's sake?
We will do some tracking around the employer health tax grant. Of course, that replaced MSP, and our district, as have many districts, have decided to pull out of the MSP, having to manage that on behalf of employees. So yeah, we're going to do our best to, over the next few years, assess what impact that is having on our district.
Excellent. Anyone else? Hearing no further questions at this moment, I move on then to, thank you very much, Nicole. And now we have a financial update. And I believe Candace, you said, was going to give us that on the operating fund project, or is there something else that needs to be done there?
Yeah, no, this is, and I just want to mention to trustees that all of these items are items that normally would come through our committees. So the budget information package has technically come through our budget committee. The financial update we provide every month, and typically it would be presented at our finance committee and then brought through to the board. So I will have Candace give her update on that. And then the next item, which is the briefing note on the capital project update, that normally would come through our facilities committee to the board, and I will ask Ian to speak to that item. So Candace can do the financial update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, everybody. Hope everyone is safe and well. So we have two reports tonight that would normally come through Finance Committee as part of the financial update. These reports are included in your package tonight, starting on page 32, and they are for your information. So the first report is the operating fund projection, again on page 32. This report is compiled and shared with our Finance Committee and board each year once the final amended annual budget is approved by the board. So this report that you're seeing is also compiled in the same manner as Schedule 2C, which you would normally see on our financial statement. It shows the board as of March 31st, our amended annual budget, our actual expenses to March 31st, as well as a projection to the end of June, and how that projection will actually vary to the approved budget. So when you see the variance from budget column, it is basically showing the items where we are projecting to either be over or under our budget for the year. So please keep in mind that with each successive projection that we have each month and that we'll be sharing with you, we will see some very varying results as we learn more information, and it's really meant just for our information and discussion purposes only. So the second page of the operating fund year-end projection on page 33 really describes the variances that you're seeing on the initial page of the report, and it's basically outlining any explanations for variances that exceed 5%. If you're curious as to why we use a 5% variance, we've selected that percentage as it's consistent with the approach and value that's actually used by our auditors, which currently are the Office of the Auditor General of British Columbia. So I'm not going to go through every line in detail as the explanations are included on page 33, but before I give a quick review of the capital fund update, I'm just wondering if there's any questions about this specific report.
Anyone with a question? Hearing none. Candace, you want to move to the capital fund update?
Sure. So the
Thank you.
capital fund update that starts on page 34, this report is a monthly report that we provide to the board, typically through the finance committee. And basically what it is showing is our budget and our expenditures to date for both local capital and for our bylaw capital project. So the local capital, I'm sure as you all recall, is really the funds set aside by the board to fund the board's various capital initiatives. And then the bylaw capital projects are the ministry specific funding for capital project agreements. So the bylaw that was passed earlier tonight and adopted for the two upcoming projects, it will eventually too end up on this report under our bylaw capital projects, as we will be reporting back to you on the capital project budget as well as the expenditures to date and if there's any variances. So for each of the local capital and the bylaw capital projects, again, we've shown any budget with the expenditures to March 31st and any variances, as well as some notes on the right-hand side of the report, giving a little bit more description of some of the items. So one thing to note on local capital is you can see that when we were talking earlier, when Nicole had been talking about some board surplus spending plans, the board did approve back in November some funds to be set aside for some capital initiatives that are now included on this report. Other than that, I don't have anything new to report. We did review this together last month. So if there's, I'm just wondering, I guess, if there's any further questions.
Anyone with any questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Candace. Take care of yourself as well. Stay healthy.
I will. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Moving now to the briefing note on the capital project update, and I don't know whether he's here or not. I assume he is. So our Director of Operations, Ian Hasselgrave, are you about?
Hello, I am here. So yeah, so the briefing note is on page 36 of the board package, and I'm not going to go over it in detail. But what I think the good news is right now is that we have a series of fairly major capital projects that are happening at a pretty difficult time, and we are actually rather on track, which is positive. Lake Trail School is at a really convenient time that most of the work is outside, and a lot of opportunity for the workers to social distance or physically distance. It could get trickier in the next 8 months as things get closed up and trades have to work in closer proximity. It's the same with Hornby right now. We're in a good spot. We've got the demolition done. Excavation and foundation will be fairly soon, and the summer will be devoted to construction drawings and tender packages, with things starting in September. Denman Island Child Care Facility is presently on hold. It went out to tender at probably the most difficult time, which was just before the public health orders kicked in. And then as we were working with the best proponent for that, we were over budget, and we're working through value engineering. It came really hard to nail it down because they simply didn't know what the supply chain of their staffing was going to look like. So the appropriate course of action was to really put a delay in, and that's been indicated to MCFD because we want to deliver a good project there. The mechanical works, incredible interest in the work. I think the local contractors are feeling nervous, so we've had some great pricing and some really good interest, so we're excited by that. I think in general, I have spoken with many construction firms and contractors recently, and one of the overriding principles right now is we need to figure out how to do this. And you know, when you get real leaders in this field like Alan Fletcher, you know, these are folks that say we're going to be dealing with issues around COVID for a fairly long time, so we have to get good at doing construction because, you know, work has to go on. And I think what I've seen, which is really neat over the last, say, 6 or 8 weeks, is people buying in, you know, construction companies modifying their practice around lunches and break spaces, and the way they have, you know, hot and cold running water for hand washing, which were a lot of things that we would consider, you know, totally reasonable, but were absent from that industry. And the BC Construction Safety Association, which is a really a good body out of Victoria, has put together some excellent documentation around how contractors can proceed in this environment. So I think industry is adapting and adapting quickly. So I view that as really positive as we move forward with our capital projects, and we'll see how these unfold over the next few months, and I'll be sure to keep the board well updated.
Thank you very much, Ian. Any questions for our director?
Yeah, Ian, I just have a
Thank you, Sheila. Go ahead.
It's so thanks so much for the update and all of this work. I'm disappointed about the Denman facility, but I am wondering if you've had conversations with well, of course, I mean, I'm sure you're talking with the society there, but is this a space for the community to be looking for some fundraising to bring to this project in order to carry forward and end up with a really great center? Is there any discussion around that going on?
You know what, we're actually, I'm holding off on that part of the discussion right now, because I think we can build a great space and we have an excellent design. But I think we just really got caught up in the turbulence of COVID coming in, and that we're at that place where nobody knew what it was going to mean. So I think so I've basically, after meeting with MCFD, had a really significant regrouping with Jim Matthew, who's a very long-time Denman resident family, who's the lead designer on this. And what we have done is slim down the drawings a little bit, but we just have an outstanding facility planned. And I think, you know, we'll reassess a moment in the summer to pursue this again. So I think all we've done is lost some time on it, and we should still be able to deliver a really good project in the budget, because I think it will be, you know, the fundraising that's going to happen for this facility, I'd really like it to go towards the outfitting of the inside with new manipulatives and things for the families and the kids that are going to be there. So yeah, I agree, Sheila, that it you know, it's really disappointing, but I think we still have a really bright future for the project.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Any other questions for you? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Hesselgrave. You take care of
Okay,
yourself.
thank you.
Good. On to our next order of business, human resources, and I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Frowley for retirements and recognition.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we have Allison Windecker, a teacher at Cumberland Community School, who will retire effective June 30th, 2020, after 27 years of service with the district. Bonnie Green, an educational assistant and interpreter for student services, will retire effective, she's updated that to June 30th, 2020, after 2 years of service with the district. Linda Dirksen, educational assistant, life skills, Mark R. Isfeld Secondary School, will retire effective June 30th, 2020, after 14 years of service with the district. R. Edward Walker, teacher at GP Vanny Secondary School, will retire effective June 26, 2020, after 27 years of service with the district. Cheryl Beek, senior administrative assistant at Royston Elementary School, will retire effective July 31st, 2020, after 17 years of service with the district. And Susan Carr Hilton, teacher of GP Vanny Secondary School, will retire effective June 30th, 2020, after 30 years of service with the district. And I would like to move that the Board of Education receive the retirements and recognition report as information.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that with a question. Okay, so the question I have, I'm not sure who this would be directed to. Once again, we're unable to hold our annual retirement celebration for many of these extraordinary staff members who've over the years have served our district and our students. And I'm wondering if there's a plan or an option that the Board of Education, like a video or a video thank you or something that we can do, an acknowledgement that we can share with them to share the appreciation that as a district and board that we have towards these staff members. So there's any talk about how we can honor and celebrate them, because our usual celebration gathering is not going to happen, much like our grad students. We've got to find something different to do. And I'm wondering what plans are to celebrate the staff that are retiring after so many years of serving our district and our students.
Thank you. Nothing concrete yet, but we are looking at all options. And I do like the idea of the video messaging. So it is something we're discussing here, how to recognize those people who have who've dedicated so many years of excellent service to our district. So it is on our radar.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Janice. That was an excellent question. Anyone else with any questions? Okay, it's been moved by Tanya, seconded by Janice. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, it's passed. On we go. There have been no board committee meetings in April, so we move to board business. And Michelle, you have a motion.
I do. My motion is, or the motion that I provided, is that the Board of Education resume the standing committee meetings that were suspended until further notice, and the motion passed on March 31st, 2020. The Policy Committee, Community Engagement Committee, Labor Relations Committee, Facilities Committee, Finance Committee, Subcommittee Budget, and Subcommittee Audit.
And I'll second the motion, Trustee Caton.
Okay, so then.
Seconder. Janice seconded. Do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. So the middle of March until today has been the longest year in 6 weeks that any of us ever want to experience again. But now we're looking at this new normal. and our board has a lot of work that we need to carry on. And as chair of the policy committee and as a member of the facilities committee, and all of our other committees that the rest of the board participate in, I believe it's time, using virtual meetings like we're doing now, to carry on the work, maybe not at the same speed, but to carry on the important work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to it? Anyone else wish to speak at all about it?
I would like to.
Yes, please.
So although I totally understand what Trustee Waite is saying and the importance of these committees, at this time, I won't support this because there's so much work that the senior management is already doing to pull them into yet another meeting when they are going all out and the focus needs to be on what we're doing for the students right now. I will not be supporting the motion.
So this is Trustee Caton, and I'd like to speak to the motion, please.
Please.
So I will be supporting this motion. I don't think as committees we have to meet every month, but our roles is of more importance now than ever, whether it comes to governance, advocacy, policy, and budget process. We're in uncharted times, and we've heard our president today speak with the Minister of Education about the important role trustees will have now with the new norm, the new education model, the new supporting our students. And we can work together as a group. We can find time. Other boards have managed to meet, whether it's monthly or bi-monthly. But I think now, more than ever, we do have to connect. Policies have to be possibly developed to deal with the new COVID-19 and how we proceed, budget implications. There's a number of factors we have to do. So I think that these committees are important. It's our role as governors. It's our role as advocates for public education. And I think that we can meet and also respect the time of everybody. Once every 3 months, once every 2 months, whatever works, works. It doesn't have to be a monthly meeting, but I think that it's important that we as trustees who are elected to govern this district and support our students, teachers and staff need to be part of the solution, part of the process, and continue to work and advocate for public education to ensure that whatever happens through the new norm of education, our students are first and foremost affected positively. So I'm going to support this motion.
Anyone else?
Can I, Ian?
Yes.
Okay. Someone else, is that Sarah Jane?
No.
It was actually, I was
okay.
just,
Got two
sorry,
of you at the same time.
It's so hard for you to see.
Yeah, I can. So, SJ, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if anyone has any information about what other boards are doing or what the BCSDA has directed us to do in this regard, because I like the idea of keeping meetings going, but I totally understand how crazy it is right now, and just the information that we're receiving is a lot for senior leadership. So I'm just wondering, like, I didn't see anything specific directing us in any way.
Not at all.
And so I'm just wondering, you know, how many other boards have been canceling their meetings and how many are proceeding?
I have spoken to chairs at both the BCSTH board chair meetings, and I've heard them speak about it, and I've also heard Vista speak about it. And the boards that have canceled as we did, is a recognition. There's a lot that didn't go forward and cancel it, but they're not meeting in committee. The reason being, their staffs are focusing upon what needs to be done. So when senior staff has got time to, and this is very time consuming, I understand completely both, and I don't want to speak at this point for or against the motion, but yes, I have heard from chairs And a lot of them, the number I can't give you out of the 60, but from what I've heard, most are not meeting in committee. Now, they are meeting elsewhere in other ways to discuss COVID and going forward and the new reality. But committee is not where that's necessarily happening, because committee has a focus. And I understand too the need that people feel to connect with each other. No, I have no disagreement with that at all. And it's wonderful. We've got the superintendent now having coffee meetings on Friday. Great. That helps people to connect. But again, all of the things that a committee does, our board can do. The committee is only an adjunct to the board. It does not replace the board. It doesn't do the board's business. It receives the information and brings it to the board. The board, in these times, as a group, as Janice says, we advocate for public education. We are actively involved as a board. As we brought forward the budget committee, the budget information tonight, that's all been passed through people without involving staff time in another visual meeting. One of the things that board chairs have also said is they cannot believe the amount of time that we are now engaged in this kind of meeting, virtual meetings. And they're working more, they feel, than they've done before, which speaks, I guess, a bit to the new norms as well. But to answer your question, Sarah Jane, most seem not to be having committee meetings. Instead, they're focusing upon the students through their support for their senior staff. Sheila?
Thanks, Ian.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I really do. I mean, I am mindful of the extra workload that's been put on our senior management and this and I don't feel at this point in some of the committees, I mean, we've had a difficult time getting going on some of the initiatives around community engagement, and I wouldn't be trying to move forward with too much on that sphere at this point in terms of organized meetings. So I don't think that technically this motion to resume our meetings does not imply that we would be having meetings, but the meetings are somehow markers for the fact that the board members who've been assigned to it have a mandate and will be putting their minds to it and saying in some cases, and I think policy committee might be one of the most critical ones, facilities and finance as well, where that decision of board members feeling that there is an urgent need for some board initiative or reporting accountability issues, in order to as we stand now, in order for us to do some work on these things, we need to come back to a board meeting to get this motion passed. So I'm more inclined, I do feel that we had an emergency response. We didn't know how long it was going to last. We found that there are some ways to work, and I'd like to kind of re-empower those committees a little bit. I agree with Janice. We're probably not talking about a monthly meeting. We're not talking about a lengthy time, but that touch in to say, are we going to hold this meeting? What would be its agenda? Or here's an initiative that we need to inform ourselves on and potentially bring to the board. Let's meet, and having the capacity to do that, I feel would be very valuable in our board role and the responsibilities that we have. So I'm in favor of this motion. We moved quite quickly to suspend, but I feel that we understand the workload that our senior management are under, and we don't want to add to it, but I do think that it could be a useful tool for us as trustees, and I'd like to see it put back.
So can I answer Sarah Jane's question with respect to what other boards are doing? Is that acceptable, Mr. Chair?
No, thank you.
Or do you want to have somebody else speak first?
Yeah, have somebody else speak first.
Okay, I'll come back to me because I do have a response to her question.
And Trustee Hawksby, do you have anything to add?
Hi, well, I do understand both sides. We don't want to overextend our senior staff because they are doing quite a bit of work dealing with the pandemic and making sure our students and staff are doing okay. I do feel that having our committees are quite valuable, and if we do have occasional need for talking, it would be a good thing to have. Not that it necessarily has to be a giant meeting or monthly for that matter.
Okay, thank you very much. We only have 2 months left. So if we're not having monthly meetings, again, we're doing this is going towards September, which I would expect fully that we would be having committee meetings in September going on. But we've only got 2 months. We don't know whether or not they're going to call for a stop at the end of May and give us the month of June. We don't have any ideas on any of that. I can put the question to the board chairs through the hub and come back with an answer. And normally that would have been what we would have done if this had been a notice of motion and go forward. It would have come next month, and I could have provided, you know, that kind of information. I can't do that even now in the short term to find out exactly how many boards are both suspending and how many are just simply not meeting in committee. That's a possibility, and I'm willing to do that. As I say, my concern still, we've got a lot of work that our senior staff have to do. And I'm conscious of that. So I would speak against this motion. And now, second round of questions or statements. So Janice, you have something you wanted to say about it?
Well, when I read this motion, I did check with some of my colleagues across the province and ask what their boards were doing. Many of them have, they haven't canceled their committee meetings. They are meeting as needed, as requested. Some haven't met at all. Some have putting on the process. But the thing is, it's a placeholder. It's a placeholder there for if for something they need to meet, their opportunities there. The previous motion we had, which I think that Trustee Waite was speaking to, is that we canceled all our committee meetings and we've suspended it indefinitely. What she's saying is like when I go back to that one there, and when I read this motion here, is that she wants to resume them that were suspended. But I don't believe she's saying every month. And I believe that we can respect the relationship we have with senior management and their time frame and meet as if, when, and required, because we could meet May, we could meet June, we could maybe August, we could meet September. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to have to develop new policies with respect to COVID-19, and having a policy committee that could connect to have those conversations as a placeholder to me is positive. This motion doesn't say that we have to meet monthly. And some boards, you are right, Trustee Hargraves, have not met. Some have canceled. Others have continued on. So there's a myriad of things what other boards have done in the district. But I don't look at what other boards do. I look at what we do as a board with our relationship with ourselves and senior management. And I think this motion here allows the committees to be a placeholder to be there if and when we need them, based on senior management's availability, based on trustees' availability. There's nothing in there says that we have to go back and meeting monthly. So I think there's some flexibility there that will address the concerns that you and Trustee Foley have.
And can I ask one more question? And I feel like we're talking about this a lot, but because we've suspended the meetings, is that correct? That if something was happening, like a policy issue, we couldn't hold a meeting? Like, is it worth it to just put the meetings back in place and not use them? Like, I guess I'm just wondering about the, like,
we've been meeting, as Nicole brought forward that information and shared the budget That went through all of the committee members. You can still, the same with policy. If policy was necessary for COVID, Tom can have you guys come in, you guys would know about exactly what needed to be done at that point, or have a virtual meeting if you like, or share the information, the same as Nicole did. But I'll ask Nicole to speak to how she did the budget committee, if she would, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do also want to I don't want to get too involved in the discussion, but I do want to just clarify that the meetings that were suspended were standing committees. And standing committees are typically committees that are meeting once a month. We would have to look at the terms of reference for each of those committees to determine what the requirements are to hold meetings. If this motion, if we want it to go forward, but we just want to be able to have meetings as needed, then maybe that needs to be stated in the motion that perhaps we unsuspend them and hold them as needed, because now we're talking about an ad hoc committee structure. So I just want to be, I just want the board to be aware that there is a purpose to a standing committee structure versus an ad hoc committee. So something to think about in the motion. As far as the budget committee, yes, we didn't hold virtual meetings. We didn't hold in-person meetings, but I was still sharing the information with the budget committee and communicating with the members via email. So I hope that answers your question.
It's Michelle. I'd like to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My understanding of having sat on the standing committees for a while is that there are times that we don't hold a meeting every month where there may not be issues to discuss or it's a busy time of year and the meetings don't happen. The motion that came to the March meeting wasn't in the agenda, or at least I didn't see it. And so I think it surprised a lot of us. And we could have not had that motion and just not had the meetings. But because the motion passed, it changes how we can function. And speaking, I'm going to say this again, speaking as chair of the policy committee, there is some work that we need to get done. It doesn't need to be next week, but there is some work that we need to work on in the next few months. And this doesn't mean that all the committees have to come back on board full steam. I just use the same motion language. And thank you to the Secretary Treasurer who helped word the motion the same way to reverse it. And I'm not, my intent, and I don't believe the intent of anybody who's supporting this, is to put additional pressure on an already busy team, but it's to provide us with the opportunity to do the work that we have been elected to do, and some of it still needs to continue. And so it's, you know, I mean, we all know how upside down our worlds are. However, there is still work of our board that needs to continue. And some of the pieces involve work in the committees. Otherwise, then we're going to have multiple committee of the whole meetings to get some of this work done, which may take more time than less. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. I don't know if I can or at this point. And I'll go through each one, find out who's in favor and who's against so that we have it recorded. Any objections to that? Hearing none, okay. Vice Chair Frowley, for or against?
Against.
Trustee Hawksby, for or against?
For.
Trustee Howe, for or against?
For.
Trustee McDonald, for or against?
For.
Trustee Waite, for or against?
For.
Trustee Caton, for or against?
For.
Passes. Now, on to board correspondence. The stuff I shared with you at the beginning in my board's chair report came through at a later date than our agenda coming out, so it couldn't be included as board correspondence. That's why I included it in my particular segment of the agenda. I would now move from there, because I have no correspondence to share at this point, to public question period. And Josh.
There are currently no questions submitted.
Okay, having seen no questions submitted.
Can I ask a question regarding questions there, Chair Hargraves? Do we send an email out or letting know DPAC that we're having a meeting and there's a process, and or do we just assume that they know to do that? I'm just wondering, with all that's going on, if there's a way that we can, people are really busy, they may not know we're having a meeting, but they may have a question. Is there a way that we can sort of give them a, you know what, this is the process, remind them gently again? They may not have anything, but yet again, they may not know how to ask us those questions.
Mr. Porter, can you respond to that at all?
Yeah, during the live stream, there is text on the video that says they can email or use the live chat. As well, that email address is actually active all the time. So if something comes in beyond a meeting, we can respond appropriately at a later date.
And are they made aware through all of the regular processes that we're having a board meeting, etc.?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no further questions, having no further questions, hearing no further questions, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Then we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Stay healthy. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Nice
Thanks, everyone.
to see you or your initials.
Thank you, Sheila. Good night.